So having Soulbound Tokens definitely has a really interesting use case, especially when you go into the thing of Web3 digital identity. It's very important to have an asset that can be connected to you and just to you, because building a reputation shouldn't be about buying, for example, degrees or driver's license. That's something you should own, and people could be sure of that this is something you achieve. And then reputation is a really interesting use case that comes out of it.
So I'm happy to welcome on today's podcast episode Alex. He's working on a blockchain-based project, but today we are not talking about his project. We are talking about some crypto news and also some other things happening in the space, like Soulbound Tokens. Welcome to my podcast, Alex.
Hi, Sebastian. Thanks for the invite. Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
So my first question is always, who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, thank you. I'm Alex. I'm born and raised in Munich. And currently I'm studying at TUM. I study informatics and business, Wirtschaftsinformatik. And I got into crypto 3 years ago, a bit in the bull run, but also a bit before. And since then, I did some projects in the space. I got to know communities. And yeah, now I'm trying to keep up with everything going on and learning what's the latest in the blockchain space.
Nice. Did you had a specific moment where you would say you fell into the rabbit hole?
I would say it would have been like October 2019. I heard about it before. A friend of mine had a brother who mined 2017. I also had Dogecoin at the time, but I think 2019 October was like the time when also like the first bull run started, where I really got into it and looked into what it can do and what it can be.
But then no like specific event where you said, okay, wow, this news or a person dragged you into the space?
I think it was a bit prominent in my friend group. I also got like into investing, normal stocks, but crypto as an asset is also an investment. So I think that's a thing. And then like in the midst of 2020, I actually coded my own coin. It's a BEP20 token, so it's nothing too special. But I think that was one event where I felt like it's crazy to be able to do something like that.
Yeah, that's nice. So I think general curiosity about different projects is also a huge driver, and also other people. I think also a lot of people, also like myself, came to the space looking for some alpha to make some money, and then read more and more about the philosophy. And talking about the philosophy, there are some major news. One of them is about Coinbase and BlackRock. And you all probably know Coinbase. And you should also know BlackRock because it's the largest asset manager in the world. And the news is that institutional clients of BlackRock are now using Coinbase, or they get direct access over Coinbase to invest into Bitcoin. What do you think about this or these news?
I think it's a really interesting move when you look at it at first glance, because I mean, BlackRock said they did it because a lot of like institutional traders they are having with their Aladdin platform are interested into using this kind of service, and that's why they did it. Because I already see a lot of like articles pop up where they say, oh, this could be the next big thing if BlackRock only invests like 0.5% of what they own. Bitcoin could jump to 90,000 to 200,000. So it's going crazy again. But I think when you look at it like a bit less hype-based, I think it's just an interesting move from BlackRock, where they say, okay, we have a platform and Bitcoin is a relatively big speculation asset. So they say, okay, our traders should be exposed to that. And I mean, Coinbase has a lot of luck with it. I think there's a CNN article where they say BlackRock could be the savior of Coinbase because Coinbase had some pretty bad numbers this quarter. They had 46% loss in revenue. They had to lay off 20% almost of workers. That's nothing uncommon in the blockchain space. I mean, OpenSea had to do it also. But I think with trading being down, Coinbase is especially exposed because they are publicly traded, so they have to show these kind of numbers. And now they have BlackRock like on their side. They can announce a partnership. So I think it's very healthy for the space. But at the same moment, you have to see that institutional traders still look at Bitcoin or the blockchain space in general as a speculation asset and not as like huge technology on the verge of breakthrough.
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of interesting things you said. One of them is, I think, the change of mindset. Even though some of them might see it as a speculation asset, if I look back like 5 years ago, I have found a quote of Larry Fink, who's the CEO of BlackRock, who said, Bitcoin is an index of money laundering. And to be totally honest, I wouldn't judge him too hard for this comment, because I think when Bitcoin was in the early stage, it was definitely used by a lot of people for money laundering or at least for criminal activities. But also when I look back to last year, I found also another article which was also about Larry Fink and Jamie Dimon, I think he's pronounced in English, the CEO of JP Morgan. And they said they believe in the value and the idea of digitalized currency and the blockchain, but they were very skeptical still about Bitcoin. And so I think it's a huge mindset shift. And even though maybe they see it as a speculation object with BlackRock and these large institutional investors coming into the space, I think it will automatically push regulation and probably also give opportunities for new companies, because there will be new money in the market.
Yeah, I think it's a very healthy move. I mean, it will expand like the people trading with this asset. It's the money laundering thing is also an interesting topic, because I think 3 days ago, Tornado Cash, which is a tumbler for Bitcoin, that's when you can put in cryptocurrencies into a program and you get like the same amount of cryptocurrencies out of it, but different coins, so you can't be traced as easy. I think it got put on the US sanction list. So it's interesting to see that it kind of, there's a kind of shift in the market that really separates between like the money laundering, the bad habits that are going on, and the healthy things. So putting it into institutional trading, having publicly traded companies like Coinbase.
Yeah, definitely. I'm also quite skeptical about these crypto mixers. And I also think they will not work for eternity, because I made like an episode about the hack of the DAO, and they used like the Wasabi mixer, and they were able to demix what happened inside the mixer, or inside the mixer like in a logical way. But I think there are a lot of projects where you might be able to cover your trace at the moment, but in the future it comes out what happened. And I think the same thing is with Monero, for example, because it's, for those who do not know it, it's also a privacy coin. And I would say it has like a high criminality adaption rate. So I don't have an official statistic, but I would say it's definitely more than 50% of the use cases of Monero are probably related to criminal purposes, or maybe not definitely criminal, but at least, let's say, in a gray area. And I also read articles that I think US governments or government agencies have investigation teams working on Monero to decrypt it. And I think sooner or later they will be able to do it, because I would not bet against the US government, especially if you see how many developers Monero has, and on the other hand, how many people the US government can finance.
Yeah. I mean, in the end, blockchain in itself is a ledger that tracks every transaction and stores it for eternity. So you can encrypt it as good as you like. I think at some point these mixers, Monero, are not as viable as people think it is. And I think that's a good thing. I mean, I always read like the argument, because it's non-fungible, you can still have these tracebacks to your coins, like what happened with them beforehand. But I'm not sure why that's so important to look at, because in the end, if you didn't do anything criminal with it, why should you care that somebody else did it beforehand?
So that's an interesting argument, also in regard of Soulbound tokens. So maybe we can talk about that, because I think the connection is great. Because I think it has the same argumentation structure, or the same question in the end, about anonymity versus transparency. But before we go deeper, do you want to give a quick explanation of what Soulbound tokens are?
Yeah, Soulbound tokens, I would categorize them also as non-fungible tokens, but the most important aspect is that they're not transferable. So if you get a Soulbound token, or it gets created, you can't transfer it to another wallet, you can't sell it. So that's a pretty big distinction, and I think it's a very interesting use case and step that will have to take place, because right now everything non-fungible still can be sold, traded, given away. And if you think about use cases, we'll probably talk about some, like a bachelor's degree that gets minted and given to you. You selling that is obviously not like part of the deal. So
yeah, definitely. So it's really connected to your soul. And I think it's quite interesting, and you can establish a network of origin and reputation. And for those who do not know, I think Vitalik was one of the people who also coined the term. So there's a white paper published, and I think there are some pro arguments and also some contra arguments. And I read some pro arguments are like that you can establish like a origin of documents, for example, as you told, of professional certification, achievements, or other stuff, personal information. And also with the big problem in the space, right, is scams and theft and all this stuff. And they will, or a Soulbound token will enable you to build a reputation. And also it's good for measuring decentralization. I read some of the points in the white paper now. So it's not only my thoughts I'm quoting. One of them is also creating novel markets with decomposable shared rights and permissions, and enabling decentralized key management. I think these are strong arguments. And do you think there will be a future in these Soulbound tokens?
I definitely think that they will find their use cases and niches like NFTs did, because in the end, it's just another adoption of the blockchain technology, another like twist. And I definitely think there are use cases like NFTs were for art. As I said, bachelor degrees, your driver's license, everything you do as a person, you earn as a person, you create as a person. If you want to digitalize that, it hinders you if you're able to sell that or to transfer that. So having Soulbound tokens definitely has a really interesting use case, especially when you go into the thing of Web3 digital identity. It's very important to have an asset that can be connected to you and just to you, because building a reputation shouldn't be about buying, for example, degrees or driver's license. That's something you should own, and people could be sure of that this is something you achieved. And then reputation is a really interesting use case that comes out of it.
Do you see any problems with Soulbound tokens?
I think there are a lot of technical problems. I mean, I'm not too sure about it right now, but I think it's also interesting to see how this affects you, because a reputation can always be destroyed in some way, can always be like brought down in a way. So this can obviously be a bachelor's degree or driver's license, but if, for example, news articles get minted to you as a person, and these are bad news articles or defamatory, this could also have totally negative effects if you can't do anything about it, and it's like on there forever. So there are always good and bad sides, but probably the execution of it and how it will like work out in the future is a lot more interesting. And I think that's something to have an eye on in the next like few months, how it will evolve.
Definitely. So I also have some contra arguments prepared. One of them is, as you said, also everything is stored on a blockchain, and we have to ask the question if we want this. For example, if you have somebody who was a criminal in the past, and they want to, let's say, how do you say it, re-socialize and to be again a part of society where they have a chance to recover. And as you also said, the implementation is here the key, or how you implement it. And also in the white paper, it is mentioned that to deal with like over publicity, there are a number of different solutions. And one would be to have like some information on the Soulbound token, so on chain, and or for example only the hash on chain, and the other data off chain, for example on your own device or on a cloud service or something, or on the IPFS system. But I still think, so if you have to store the data off chain, it would be somewhere, right? And I don't know if this is a good idea. Or if we're talking about reputation, also about degrees, I think reflecting back on my studies, when I started my business administration studies at the LMU Munich, which is also a university with a good reputation, I was quite arrogant about my studies. And if you study business administration, a lot of people tend to classify different banks, different consultancies in different tiers. So they say this is a tier 1 investment bank, this is a tier 1 consultancy, and this is a tier 1, this is a target university. And I really don't like it, because I think often the degrees are not so different. It's often what you make out of your studies. And it basically also, I think it builds like a segregated society where some people think they are better than others because they were able to get a specific education. And also, if I have the Soulbound token, I'm thinking a little bit about like the, how do you say it, social credit system in China. And yeah, for example, if you have your neighborhood or your city where you were born on your Soulbound token, and maybe it's public, maybe it's not.
Your birth certificate could be something you get put in. I mean, I think for this to like evolve into something that has a really strong use case, wallets, for example, have to be a lot more prominent. I mean, everybody can make 10 wallets right now, but if you have like one wallet that represents really your life, that would be a personal identity in the internet. Data ownership is a huge thing of that. Then, for example, a wallet that stores your birth certificate, a tax things, everything related to that, it could be stored, but what it then feeds into is that you're really transparent. And I think China's social credit system is an interesting thing of that. We had it actually in lectures this semester, and on bus stations and train stations, you can see the credit system scores of other people in broad daylight, and you can and this credit system can give you or give you not access to trains and schools. And if that's something we really want, I think we have to really be careful about the implementation and the strengths it will hold in a society, and also in the internet of tomorrow.
And it ultimately comes to the question, do you want to have more transparency or more anonymity, or how do you balance it? And personally, I think at first transparency, of course, always seems so bright. But if you look at a lot of societal processes, it will, I think, lead that some people are automatically discriminated because of where they were born, or which education they have, or which background they have. I think it wouldn't be so great because not everybody gets the same opportunity. On the other hand, the question is, how is this not at the moment the case, right?
Yeah. I mean, for example, if you say you have a wallet with the birth certificate and your tax statements from the last 10 years, and you have this wallet, and you go to a job interview, right now you get you present your CV and you present yourself. But if there's an easy way to show everything you have, why wouldn't companies be interested in that? And then it's the question of this transparency, anonymity discussion is a very interesting thing. I think blockchain is also dealing with in a way. I think transparency has shown to be a huge pro factor. I don't know if you know CoffeeZilla, is a YouTuber who does a lot about the crimes and frauds going on, and he can debunk this as a YouTuber without any financial records, because he has the blockchain. He can say, look here, this date, this time, this much money. And I think that's a huge asset blockchain and the cryptocurrencies in general have, that you can, as a normal person, look into the network and therefore trust the network. But at the same moment, if you go big, if you scale and put it into real life, it really begs the question if transparency can work in this way, because China's social credit system, or even the Schufa, if there's only one slight hiccup in code, for example, it can have huge repercussions on everybody in society. So I think we have a long way to go there, but we will see what use cases come out of it.
Yeah, definitely. One thing also about the traceability of the blockchain mentioned in one of the contra arguments I read was, if you can, for example, identify persons with the Soulbound tokens or with their wallet address, I mean, sooner or later, if you really use a wallet address often, and also with your friends, it makes you, I would say, over time identifiable. So, or it's easy to identify yourself, of course. If you use another name, like a pseudonym, like another name in the internet, it would be possible that you stay completely anonymous. But I think if you can identify the people, and what some people are already doing, right, they are tracking the transactions of people from crypto VCs, and they are looking in which projects or NFTs they were investing. And on the one hand, this is of course interesting. But on the other hand, if you have, for example, an ethnic minority or something, and especially if you look in the world how often it happened, and even happening right now in a lot of countries where specific groups are targeted, I think it is also a huge vulnerability, because you can identify these people and could track everything they are doing and also their assets and stuff. So I'm not sure about this. And also one point from the technical perspective, interesting, or what I think was interesting, is that what happens when you have been hacked, for example, and there is like a community recovery mechanism, which enables you to get like your Soulbound token back, let's say in a very easy way, but it's like a chicken and egg problem. So what should be first there? So is there first the Soulbound token, or is there first the recovery system?
Yeah.
So quite controversial how it will be implemented. I also think if you have a Soulbound token which is connected to yourself, there should be a KYC, like a know your customer process, which you have in a bank, and then you need a centralized institution. And if you have like a centralized institution, it would be probably the state. Or personally, I would prefer to have, for example, here, the German state doing the KYC process to do not give my data away to a company, for example.
Yeah, I think data ownership and data privacy is something that maybe will come up in the next few years as a very, very crucial part. I mean, right now we are paying with our data, and that's obvious. The big companies give us social media, Google for free, and we pay by giving our data, making us self-transparent. And that's a trade-off we are willing to take right now. But I think there can be, it's probably going into the direction of Web3, something where you own your data and sell it in order to buy things like social media. So social media gets implemented in a way you have to pay for it, and you can sell in the same way your data, but you own it. So I think that's a very interesting thing, and Soulbound tokens can be a huge part of it because it's something that's not able to be sold, and therefore is maybe valuable to be sold in the way that the person knows that you own it. So Google then has to pay for knowing that you own a bachelor's degree to have a better picture of you. But these are business models, I think, that will be very interesting to see in the future. And are right now not as foreseeable because Web3 and ID rights can be a huge thing. I think it has a huge technical problem right now. Scalability is blockchain always very interesting to see. So we will see. And I think that Soulbound tokens can be at the center of the next bull run, maybe also the center. So we will see how this technology will pan out.
And what you said was reminding me of these smartphones where you can get a smartphone cheaper if you are willing to accept ads on your smartphone. And this is one example. But I also read somewhere an article of a marketer, and she said in the article that the problem is that the people who are willing to sell like their data for money are most of the times not the people companies want to target, right?
That's I think a very interesting point. Yeah, I think a lot of the people who have very interesting data do not realize they have interesting data, and I think the whole ad revenue and data revenue game is pretty crazy. I read a really interesting startup. They sell free water, so they give out water for free, but the water itself sells by putting ads on it. So you have the water bottle with which has like, I don't know, 5 to 10 ads on it, and water itself is so cheap that it pays off itself by giving it away free. I thought it was genius, but I think that shows you how profitable ads can be and how profitable that can play together if you know how to target people. So very interesting.
It's crazy. And I think it's also underrated how much worth our attention is. And if you have all these platforms, or not all, but a lot of platforms who only try to increase your attention to also increase your, let's say, the ads probably you're exposed to. Yeah, it's crazy, and also like from a personal development perspective, thinking more and more how much time should I spend on Instagram, how much time should I spend on Twitter or on other platforms, and how much value add do these platforms really give me.
Yeah, definitely.
And maybe we also wanted to talk a little bit about the economic and the economic environment. And I want to hear a little bit your opinion on the current situation, and maybe also where you see crypto at the moment.
Yeah, I think so. I would say crypto now is at a point. I think it recovered a bit in the last weeks again. I think crypto is back to the point where it is tied to the like broad economic spectrum. So if the normal markets go up, Bitcoin goes up, and other coins go up. You saw it with Celsius and Terra Luna. You did a podcast episode about it. I think that the crypto scene crashed a lot and went down a lot, but I think it's now back to like normal. And now you have to look like what the normal markets do. And we will see what you think about it. But I think the normal economic markets are under a lot of pressure right now. In the last 3 to 4 weeks, I think there was a lot of recovery. But looking into the next like 6 months, I think there will be a lot of problems regarding the economic markets. You have geopolitical problems like Taiwan, Ukraine, but also Middle East is starting to heat up again. You have Brazil, where you have Bolsonaro as a leader who already said he won't leave office. He will stay in office. He has the military backed. And that's one of the biggest emerging markets. It's part of the BRICS. And you don't even have a working like political structure. You have Argentina, which has 70% of inflation going on. The whole Europe energy thing is a whole nother topic. I mean, we in Germany hear it a lot right now on how the energy prices could skyrocket if we're if winter comes and we don't have enough gas. But for example, I don't think it's too prominent in the news, but France at the moment has a huge problem. They have to turn off or regulate power plants because the rivers that feed them with cooling water are getting too hot, mainly because of also the hot temperatures they are experiencing right now. But the cooling of the power plants adds onto it. And there was a law in France where they said you can't go over 25 degrees into these rivers. And now it's at 28. Mm-hmm. And they are at the verge of collapsing the whole economic system of the lake by having too high temperatures and having to reduce energy in the whole country because of it. So we have a lot of problems. I mean, the whole emerging markets will have to see if they can hold ground or they will collapse. You have food shortages because of Ukraine and the Russia situation. So it will be really interesting. On the other hand, you have like strong labor. You have inflation seemingly going down in the US, even though we will have to see how that turns out. But I'm not too sure about it. And I think coming back to crypto, if crypto really wants to have a bull run and wants to get off of that, it either has to work together with the normal markets, so the normal markets have to recover itself, or there has to be a technological breakthrough like Soulbound Tokens, or I don't know. But I'm not too keen of the market situation at the moment. Your thoughts?
Very interesting things you said. So I think also looking at the situation and also looking at, let's say, macroeconomic experts or reading their opinion is also often very difficult, I think, because a lot of these theories have proven wrong in the past. And if you take economics in general, I think it's quite a delicate topic, because so much of the research is wrong or have been proven wrong. And what I like really about it, and also about stocks, is dump money theory, where you just look in your daily life. And when I ask my friends, or when I talk to people, and I talk to a lot of people, right? So I'm also in sales, and I am also talking a lot with a lot of different people, and I talk with them also about their personal life. And what I heard in the last month is many of them are waiting for a kitchen for a month. And not only one, not two, it's at least 3 or 4 people, and 3 or 4 people talking about their kitchen is a lot, right? Because how many people do you have who are expecting a kitchen? And what I can derive from it, at least in Germany, everybody who's currently wants to buy a kitchen is waiting 2 or 3 months. And I think the supply chain issues are not completely fixed at the moment. Maybe, of course, you in a lot of industries, effects of the past will not show immediately, right? So it could be also a thing of, let's say, the last 6 months, and we still have the impact, and the situation completely changed. But with the zero COVID strategy in China, even though I think they opened a lot of cities right now, but they are still sticking to the strategy and also looking to the future. I think this will also be like an indicator for recession. And we have now 2 consecutive quarters of a generally slowing down economy. And when I look at all these factors, I don't think it will be soon going up again. I think it will slow down further. And there's also I can't disclose it right here because it's confidential, but I talked to somebody, or I heard somebody talking, which I value very much, the opinion. And he said, I think a month ago, the worst is yet to come. And he's very experienced also in the financial industry. He experienced the 2008 financial crisis and the dot-com bubble. And for a lot of companies, I think the worst is yet to come. And this also is my personal opinion, because I think with all these indicators, it will probably will not get better. Of course, no financial advice. I don't have like a magic crystal ball where I can look into the future, but also the movement in the last weeks on the markets, I think it's more or less a bull trap, because I think this upward movement is doesn't it doesn't show the reality. It's maybe a small uptick, but I think it will not show reality. One last thing, sorry for the monologue, but one last thing. You talked about crypto as an inflation hedge. And of course, here also experts are very derived into 2 parties. Some say it's an inflation hedge, some say it's not. Some people say it's just an inflation hedge because Bitcoin went up, right? So they're saying, yeah, Bitcoin went up. It made more like 10% alpha per year if you invested. And I think it can be correlated to the market. I think it is to a certain part. But what I also think, and here's also a little bit the dump money theory. If we really go to a recession, and not only a recession, but also like a depression, and also like a very a phase where it will get ugly and a lot of people will lose their jobs and something, I think people might think they were looking, at this point, I think people will look at alternatives to our monetary system. And when they look for alternatives, I think the narrative, at least, of Bitcoin or of cryptocurrencies is ideal, because they will think, or not everybody, but I think a lot of people in this situation will think the monetary system and the current system plays part of the situation or in the situation. And then I could imagine then they might get into the crypto ecosystem. But of course, everything is speculation. Yeah, but these are some of my thoughts.
Yeah, but I think you touched on a lot of interesting points there. I think there is I mean, in the last 2 years, I think especially monetary policy did a lot wrong. I mean, looking backwards, it's always easy to say, but I think the Fed, the EZB, is still sleeping, but the Fed has slept too long. And I think that really hurt the monetary system. And I mean, that's one of the most interesting things talking about cryptocurrencies, if they can be an alternative currency. And you have this wording fiat money. And I'm always keen to avoid that term, because fiat is like solle werden in German, and means like it's money from nowhere. But the money we have right now is credit-based, loan-based. So it still has a certain value backed. I mean, the Fed prints it, yeah, but then gives it out in return as a loan. The EZB does the same. So I'm always a bit like, I would say I'm always a bit like slow to say that it's a real alternative right now, because a currency has to be backed by something. And talking about Bitcoin or cryptocurrency in general, it's an inflation hedge. It showed that right now it isn't backed by enough. You have housing, you have gold, classic inflation hedges. But I think Bitcoin, or the cryptocurrency, also community in general, hasn't been mature enough to really show what they're worth and what they can do. I mean, El Salvador adopted Bitcoin almost 1 year now, and the adoption plummeted, even though they gave out like benefit accounts for it. The investment, if you want to call it like that, is down 65%. And that's a country that's close to default. So they have a real problem. And it goes to show, I think, like Central Africa has now said that they want to adopt Bitcoin as a currency. So there are still these movements, but I think it's hard to tell that it's really mature enough to be adopted as a currency that is backed by something.
Yeah, I think also Bitcoin is not like a currency. It's more like digital gold. So also said before, and I had a guest. One of my earliest guests was Michael Markovici, and he said Bitcoin is backed like by the mining capacity, or the proof of work algorithm. And I think this is really interesting, because you have to have this natural barrier in order to mine Bitcoins. If you have, for example, proof of stake, the question is, of course, also in this algorithm, is it backed enough? So is it backed by enough effort or something, or could it be also like scalable or infinitive scalable in the future? And I think this question is quite hard, because of or not of course, but I'm a fan of proof of stake because of environmental reasons. But this term of scalability is a big question. And people always say like a blockchain is fixed. And I just say, just look back at the DAO hack. And there are also things on the Bitcoin blockchain I haven't fully researched yet, but I heard there was also like a fork in the very early days. And I shouldn't have mentioned it because I haven't researched it enough. But there is a lot of things I think the general public does not know, and even experts struggle to explain it to me. And I have not grasped it fully, or it's even an overstatement. There are so many open questions for me, how everything can be changed, and also the future of Bitcoin, where I talk like in a lot of episodes that the chances that there will be more than 21 million Bitcoins, or at least in the future, there will be future forks. in order to have to ensure the scalability of the network, I think it's understated that a lot of people are not thinking about it. But I don't know if I wrote it in the Discord server, but you have like these ideal conditions of a monetary system, like 2% inflation per year, that you have every year a higher amount of money. And I think this would be interesting if you have like a cryptocurrency backed, for example, by gold or something else, and then you have like the fixed amount of inflation also to it. But on the other hand, if you have like a stable coin, and it would be something like a stable coin, I don't like the principle that you switch it so that you give like €1 and get like one Tether or one USDC or one stable coin of whatever currency. I think it's currently,
I think the very interesting thing we will have to see is like blockchain enthusiasts, communities, companies. What will it be backed by? I mean, most of currencies right now are backed by a country, by an economy. The euro is backed by multiple countries, but that's, I think, one of the most interesting things if you talk about currencies, because currencies have to be something that are backed by something people have to believe in. And I think we are getting older in Western society as a whole. So digitalization and getting people to believe in these things will get harder. So we have to really unite everybody in order to really have like to use it as a currency, because I think it's interesting to see. Like right now, Ethereum, for example, is moving to proof of stake. I don't feel like proof of work is something that is sustainable in scalability, but also in the costs, the environmental costs. So maybe there will emerge a next proof of, for example, I read some things like proof of history or proof of identity, proof of reputation. We talked about reputation already. So there are some ideas in that area, and I think what the currency is backed by will be ultimately that decider of what it will be worth in the future, and maybe in the future bull run. But I think, for example, looking at depending on when the next bull run will be, I'm not sure if Bitcoin will be so big of a part right now. I mean, going back to the beginning, BlackRock only accepted that Bitcoin is part of the trading. But for everybody who really works with the blockchain economy and gets deeper into the topic, you realize that Bitcoin is a network you can't really do much with. It's the oldest, it's the most trusted, most people know about it. But if you go deeper and think about what is it backed by, what value does it have, Ethereum or others have a lot more speaking for themselves than Bitcoin.
Yeah, and I think when you said what is the currency or what is the coin backed by, one of the most interesting indicators for me is the number of developers. So I talked to Dr. Glass also about this topic, and we said if like cryptocurrencies have something like a value indicator, it could be the number of developers, and it could also be the number of active projects on the chain. And I think this is something I compare. So I compare coins by the number of developers and also the development. So how many developers are new to the project. And it is often helpful to go back in history to 2017, which is like a joke in general history. But if you analyze projects from 2017 and also the ICO bubble with these tons of coins, I think you can see that developers are a key indicator, and also to have like a stable community. And often it is like you have this first hype of a project, but then it dies because there is struggle internally. And if you have, for example, Ethereum, it is quite stable setup compared to other projects with the Ethereum foundation, and it also had like a lot of crisis in the past, and they managed to survive. And also what I think is very interesting, so last week, or on last week's episode at least, I had an interview with somebody who said, Ethereum Classic might be interesting to watch, also no financial advice, but if Ethereum, of course, moves from proof of work to proof of stake, it might be the possibility that some of the miners and some of the people in the ecosystem will move to Ethereum Classic.
Yeah, I mean, I think the merger, I think it will happen next month or in the next 2 months.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting to watch because it can show how great the ecosystem is. I mean, having this pivot from proof of work to proof of stake can really show how flexible, how good this system really is. So I think that's definitely something to keep an eye on. I think that is something that also drives the price right now. I think the hype building around it is definitely part of it. So I think Ethereum is one of the most interesting projects. No financial advice, but one of the most interesting projects to look at because of also the number of developers. I don't have numbers, but I think they are ahead by a lot.
Yeah. They are. And maybe one last thing I wanted to talk to you about are community projects. There are some you mentioned before. It's like the Pretzel DAO and the Blockchain Club. Can you maybe tell us what's it all about?
Yeah, talking about value and communities. Two things two clubs, two communities I got to know in the last few months where I dove deeper into also the Munich ecosystem. I found the Pretzel DAO. That's a community that's originated, I think, almost 8 months ago already around builders. And it's really interesting to see. They have weekly calls. You can definitely join the Discord. You have great developers. And I think the next in-house meeting, so they meet at a small room at the Tume, is in 5 days. So maybe just come around, get to know the people, because they have discussions about topics. You can always talk to people. I mean, I think the last time where there was an in-house meeting, almost everybody there was a founder, for example. So there are great minds at play. And Tom Blockchain Club is also a very interesting opportunity. You can just apply over the website. I think we can maybe put it into the description. And they're also searching for event core members, and they focus on events, education. And I think that's a very valuable thing to look at education, because that's something that has to happen a lot, because it's a very interesting topic, but a very complex topic. I mean, everybody who got into the topic sees how complex it all can be and how hard to understand. And if you want to trust it, you have to understand it, at least at the surface. So they are doing great work and always looking for members. So these two are really interesting communities in Munich. If you're more interested into it, join the Discords, join the clubs, and it's always a great time to be there.
Yeah, nice. I will check it out. And I think we covered some very interesting topics. And with looking at the time, I would say thank you very much for the interview. It was a pleasure. And I think it was also very interesting talking about Soulbound Tokens.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great evening.
Thanks for listening to this week's podcast episode. If you enjoyed it, click the bell so you will never miss an episode anymore. We also have a Web3 Compass Discord channel where we talk about exactly Web3. The link is in the show notes, feel free to join. Other than that, have a nice day and I hope you tune in next week. Cheers!